Hello, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the food and coffee just now, and it's time for our next exciting panel. Now, I would like to invite the speakers of our second panel to join me on the stage. Actually, I am very excited and look forward to the discussion we are going to have. On this panel, we have a lineup of very seasoned practitioners in different sectors related to humanitarian work with us. In addition to their practitioner experience, they are also wearing other hats, such as academics, because all of them are teaching, and they are also government officials to at some point of their career. They have a very exciting background and experience in their work. Please check our website to get more information about that. I don't want to spend too much of your time to read out their bios. We'll save it for the questions and response. I'll start. On this panel, we have former Admiral of the Australian Defence, Christopher Barry, and we have Mr. or Dr. Nair, PM, former Deputy General of the Natural Disaster Response Force of India. He is now the representative of Indian Police Foundation. And our third speaker is Dr. Amma Hussain, who is also wearing multiple hats, Vice Chairman, Chair of Muhammadiyah Disaster Management Center, Muhammadiyah Organization Indonesia. She is also an assistant professor at Yusuf Kala School of Government, University Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. And our fourth speaker is Professor Hidashi Takuchi. He is currently president of the Research Institute for Peace and Security in Japan. He used to be the Vice Minister of Defense for International Affairs of Japan government. Now I would like to start our discussion with by raising the first question to all of our speakers. So this session, actually, we are going to discuss how civil-military relations will be like in different scenarios or in different futures we project in the future. So in view of the COVID-19, climate change, the ongoing humanitarian crisis in different parts of the world, so what is the imagined future for humanitarian relations from your point of view? Sir, please.
Is that working? Yes, it is. What a great start. I'm not here as the former Chief of the Defence, so I am here as a member of the Australian Security Leaders Climate Group. And I'm here to say that I disagreed with Catherine on a couple of points. Firstly, there were weak signals about 9/11. It was written by Tom Clancy in a book called Executive Orders. And you didn't need a lot of imagination to take those scenarios and turn them into what transpired on 9/11. And the second point I want to make is on COVID-19, where is the one place on earth that actually managed to maintain its economy, its way of life, and not be affected by the virus? That place is Taiwan. Taiwan, in December 2019, had 40 million masks. They had a process for cleaning transportation. They kept their economy alive. At the end of 15 months, had something like 70 deaths from COVID. At the end of that 15 months, they changed the rules for international aircrew in Taipei Airport, from a 21-day quarantine to 10 days, and then COVID jumped out of that wheelbarrow. So that was very interesting because it's about preparedness, and that's an essentially military function. Military spend their whole life thinking about risk and what might happen as opposed to what is happening, and think to themselves, how can we stop the worst of these things occurring to us? The trouble I put forward now is we're enduring planet fightback. When I was born in 1945, there were 2.5 billion people on this planet after 2 world wars. There are now 10 billion people. Population densities in places like Gaza City are 6,500 persons once per square kilometre. Those conditions tell me that human beings are now a predatory species. And the problem for somebody like me is that the numbers actually matter. So it doesn't matter how good our systems are. When we think about what might overwhelm us, let me give you a couple of scenarios. Humanitarian scenarios, actually. There is a country called Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a considerable population of nearly 200 million people. And if the sea level goes up by more than a few more millimetres, lots of Bangladesh are going to disappear under seawater. And the same is true of the Mekong Delta. So where are all those people going to go, we ask ourselves, and what does that mean in terms of humanitarian work? The fact of the matter is, there is no home for Bangladeshis in their region because the same problems that they're confronting apply also in India, and they're not likely to go to Myanmar. I once said in the Parliament House in Australia, 40 million of them might come to Australia, whereupon the parliamentarian left the room because he didn't want to hear the news. I hope we all want to hear the news, because a former colleague of mine, Professor Will Stephan, who was an earth scientist, has said to me 3 years ago, in 2030 we will know the answer, extinction or survival. 2030. Will is now dead, unfortunately, but I think Will was wrong. Not on extinction, but on timing. I'm sitting here with a graph on my iPad that shows this year, 2023, on all the major indicators of climate change, tell me that 1.5 degrees Celsius, the Paris Agreement, is gone. But 3 months between July and September this year, the world global average temperature was 1.7 degrees Celsius. That means our world is headed well towards 2 degrees Celsius and potentially 2.5 degrees Celsius. If you looked at the results of the Canadian wildfires, Canada, in a few months, put more than 10 years' worth of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If you looked at our inability to control fossil fuels and you look at the rising greenhouse gas emissions, there is no hope for us. Because without mitigation, no amount of adaptation is going to save us. And that is a significant problem. Imagine a world where we have no fossil fuels, because that's where we need to go. How will our world economy look? How will all the work and the lifestyles we enjoy look once that happens? I think Stephan's 2030 needs to be advanced to at least 2026. In my country, that is the next federal election. I cannot get my government in Australia to move on this, and we are a big emitter of fossil fuels. We talk about climate adaptation. The fire season in Australia started 3 weeks ago. We've already lost 200 houses. After 2019, you'd have thought this was not possible to happen again. So I think we are in dire straits. We've got an international system that's broken. We have a nation-state system which is not doing all that well. And the fact is that there are 2 existential threats to humankind on the planet. One is nuclear war, and the other one is climate change. The difference is human war won't affect any of us until we're dead. But on climate change, it is going to have implications for us all, and it requires all of us to act on it. So what does this mean in terms of the civil-military relationship? It needs foresight. It needs imagination. It needs creativity. It needs new systems. The most creative class of people on this planet are the criminals. They manage to get their businesses going all the time through a change process that few of us can imagine. It's a fantastic idea that we should employ some of them to do our work for us. In the outset of 9/11, I had a friend who knew something about running terror movements. General Sifny Neander, he was the chief of the South African National Defence Force, and he had been formerly the operations commander for the ANC. We used to have very interesting conversations on the difference between organised militaries and guerrilla groups. When I said to the Americans, you ought to go and talk to Neander, he knows something about this stuff, they of course knew better than that. So on the civil-military relationships stuff, there is a lot to learn, a lot to do, but we've got to consider it cannot be business as usual.
And next I would like to invite Dr. Nair to share. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, namaste to all of you. The role of civilian as the first and the immediate responder can never be denied. Their primary role will continue in every disaster. At the same time, the role of military in delivering humanitarian assistance is not a new concept but a historical tradition. By virtue of the strong infrastructural setup and functional competency based on principles of transparency, impartiality, discipline, public appeal and acceptance, most of the military setups are well suited to respond during the contingencies when the civilian resource and manpower are overwhelmed, and a rapid response is essential to supplement the civilian setup. Post-COVID, climate change have, as rightly said, demonstrated the significance of the military in rendering human assistance during the worst-case scenarios. Even though military in most countries are the secondary responses during disasters, unlike Singapore and some other countries in this region, nevertheless their presence during large-scale disaster events is born out of a natural expectation from the society and a desirable outcome of their training and multivarious capabilities. The supremacy of civilian response lies in being the first to respond, knowledge of the terrain, population and culture, as well as being part of the system. The supremacy of military lies in technical and technological matters. Now, coming to the futures of humanitarian civil-military relationship, human communities are described generally as a loosely configured system of network of actors which combine around common funding resources and voluntary standards, sometimes without an effective chain of command. This contrasts with the militaries, which are characterized as hierarchical and output-driven. Hence, the role of military as a specialized agency in humanitarian assistance in future is likely to witness an upward trend across the world. Now, why both are relevant? The Oslo Convention states that humanitarian assistance should be as civilian as possible and as military as necessary. Thus, the concept of military action or military-like action wrapped in civilian overtones is likely to become a preferred methodology in countries where humanitarian assistance would be a necessary requirement. But all the same, some cover could be required to give the public a sense of confidence in the systems. The first imagined challenge for humanitarian civil-military relations has been necessarily the growing complexity, the increasing number of actors on either side, and the lack of role clarity on both sides. Coming to the emerging scenario, one of the crucial issues in the present and foreseeable future is the obvious physical, resource-heavy, strategic dominance of the military actors vis-a-vis civil agencies, leading to a situation of undeclared preeminence of the humanitarian decisions of the military agencies over and above those of the civilian agencies. Typically, the civil agencies doing humanitarian work in the same space is often found referring and deferring their operational decisions to the overall decisions of the military agencies. Basic issues like the area of access, what and how much to provide, operational timings, etc., are the prerogatives of the military command. This situation may be more evident in conflict zones, while other emergencies like disasters, pandemic, etc., humanitarian assistance may get leeway. Now, the situation described above and its complexity demand warrant of inevitable convergence of civil-military humanitarianism in the present and foreseeable future. Civil-military coordination in times is likely to have a surge and become an inevitable part of the training curriculum with the different agencies. Therefore, it's time for a fresh and practical set of guidelines, SOPs and do's and don'ts in the shape of a standardized rules of engagement. You and ORCHA may like to take a lead in this part. Now, therefore, it's a joint space where the civil and military operate together. Thus far, no further theory will not work. Rather, a working philosophy of coordinate, cooperate, converge will work better. Roles and functions have to be shared within their matrix of accountability of each stakeholder for delivery, promptness, impact, as well as for the acts of omission and commission too. Lastly, speaking from the Indian context, India has been keeping a high predominance to humanitarianism in all walks of life, everywhere. We believe that every action, the means doesn't mean that the process decides the means. We respect and comply with the humanitarian principles in every activity. Now, from that point of view, military versus civil may not be a appropriate terminology as a civil component in such cases in India, especially include the civilian wings of the government like police, fire services, relief agencies, etc., and NGOs, INGOs, UN agencies, academics, etc. Therefore, there is a need to have a three-tier, if not a four-tier classification: A, civilian agencies; B, military agencies; C, non-governmental agencies; and fourthly, the grassroots democratic institutions. You may be aware of the Panchayat Raj in India, which are constitutionally recognized elected bodies. Let me give an example of a local government role when you will appreciate the role during the 1999 tsunami. At least 10,000 persons died in a state called Odisha on the eastern coast of India. During 2002 cyclone Alphan, with the same intensity and velocity, it was not a tsunami, but the impact was no less. However, the death toll could be contained to 4. Even 4 is a terrible number. But 10,000 to 4 is a massive change. The credit must go to all agencies, but the main credit must go to the community. Here lies the most important part of the community. From that perspective, I would say that we need to take these things forward. Last but not the least, calamities can and will come. Hazards will also come. But to prevent hazards becoming disaster, community has a large and significant role. Here lies the building resilience by empowering communities. This is what the force which I have been heading in the Government of India, National Disaster Response Force, have been doing so far. Please allow me a second more to speak on an important aspect of our humanitarian challenge in disasters, the issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking. The morning session also spoke about the human beings. Trafficking looms large in disasters. We have witnessed this in India, Nepal and Bangladesh. In fact, traffickers predate on the vulnerable. Therefore, while we address the disasters, on the one side, we look for the relief, etc. On the other side, the disaster management agencies have to keep in focus to prevent and combat human trafficking, especially women and children. This is an area that we have been giving a lot of attention in the recent past and with great success in India and the region. Thank you. Namaste.
Thanks, Dr. Nair, for addressing 2 questions in his speech. And then Dr. Hussain, yeah, please.
Thank you. If I was asked to imagine, I think for the future, the relationship between civil and military, it's not getting lesser, but it must be, it's always be a stronger. Why? We know that military always have the ability to have the logistic and have the ability of operational. In the other side, the civil have the ability of the knowledge of the local, the knowledge of the people on the ground. So the relationship will be always be there. But how the relationship could be built, that's the most important. How to leverage each of the sector by understanding the role and to be complement. So I was thinking of highlighting the complementarity. It's very important how the military understand the role and how the civilians also engage with the command operational, for example. So this could be strengthened not during the disaster, but pre-disaster relationship will be very important, because if you only know or understand the civil-military relationship during disaster, then they are not really complement each other. So they have the different command, they have a different approach in responding any humanitarian crisis, especially when you bring military overseas or in the regional arenas. So it's very important here, not only understanding the relationship, but understanding the strength, the role, and also each sector in or pre-disaster effort is very important. Like in the country of, like in Indonesia, we cannot go without military, for example, because all the archipelago, all the logistic is supported by the military. This is very important to understand the role, but because many, for example, military is not trained for disaster response. They are trained for the regular security approach. So it's very important to also engage with the military for the preparedness, like Dr. Brick said, that the pre-preparedness for military and civil relationship. And civil here is so broad. As Dr. Nair also mentioned, the civil could be the government, at the national level, subnational level, the academia, the NGO, and then the international NGO, and even the community in the affected area. They may not know or sometimes afraid when military come, and how military act during and before disaster is also influence the relationship between the civil and military. So this kind of the more understanding, knowing each sector, and then engaging with the different actor in both military and civil will be very crucial in the future.
Thanks, Amma, for sharing your perspective on civil-military relations in the future. And I agree with you that civil-military relations will remain very important, and that's why we are here today, and for some of our participants here for a whole week. As just now Freddie and BG just mentioned, that to meet each other, to familiarize with each other, so when a disaster strikes, then we know we can work together quickly. Now I would like to invite Professor Takuchi to share your view on like how civil-military relation will be like in the future. Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Dr. Gong, thank you very much for your introduction, and let me thank RSIS for having me in this very important event. Thank you very much. First of all, please imagine where Japan is located. You know, Japan is located in Northeast Asia, and Northeast Asia is full of traditional challenges, traditional security challenges, and also non-traditional security challenges. Traditional challenges may or may not be, smaller or bigger, but definitely non-traditional challenges, particularly, natural disasters, will, I'm afraid, increase. So we have to cope with those challenges, squarely. And well, in response to your questions, definitely, the increase of restrictions and increase of demands, and also increased chances of new cooperations. And COVID-19 caused restrictions on in-person meetings like this one for a long time, and free flow of travels of human beings, and it caused impediment to cooperation. Particularly, military operational cooperation. And climate change also causes a lot of restrictions on the military. For example, restriction on military education and training due to extra heat environment, and ramification on training environment. I mean, ramification on training ground and military bases. And also, the military forces have to adapt themselves to these changes. And at the same time, COVID-19 brought increase of demands of military contribution to address the pandemic, including medical support, like vaccine shots, and take care of victims, and also transportation of vaccines and medical gears, and also related logistics, just in general. And climate change causes different demands of military contribution to address military conflicts and civil wars due to instability caused by climate change, and disaster relief operations of larger scale, as we already discussed, and shift of energy to be used for military equipment, bases, facilities, and installations from fossil energies to renewable ones. And risks are higher, and in the meantime, window of opportunity for cooperation might be wider, as shown in military medical cooperation initiated by COVID-19 pandemic. And no matter whether the military organizations are involved or not, the term security will be used more elusively and defined more broadly. Anything can become a matter of security, and it will dilute the meaning of the term and lose the sense of priority. And therefore, each government have to have a specific criteria for prioritization. As the risks are increasing and they are related to each other in a complex way in today's connected world, effective and efficient mechanism for coordination based on a whole of government approach, of course including the military, is very, very indispensable. And in this connection, I would like to mention one more thing. Very interestingly, this panel has one Japanese and one from India and one from Australia. Although we do not have any Americans in this panel, the three countries of the Quad are somewhat represented. So I would like to mention one important initiative of the Quad. Last year, in May 2022, the Quad Leaders Summit launched a very important initiative called IPMDA, Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. And the sharing information and having a common operating picture, that's the basis of international cooperation. And, excuse me. And the IPMDA focuses not only, IUU fishing, but also for humanitarian and climate-related events. So I think that in future, I personally hope that the ASEAN countries, based on the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific AOIP, and the Quad countries will cooperate together in order to achieve a better picture based on IPMDA. Well, there are still, some misunderstandings on the ASEAN side about the nature of the Quad. Actually, Quad is not an alliance. We know that, particularly, India remains autonomous. And anyway, the Quad is not an alliance. And if you see the public readouts of each Quad meetings, you'll be able to easily find the, not compatibility, but the Quad's respect of the centrality of ASEAN. So I hope that the synergy of AOIP and the spirit of the Quad will be achieved, particularly in order to achieve a common operating picture in maritime space.
Yeah, thank you, sir. For this round of question, then we hear a different perspective of civil-military coordination. On the one hand, we have seen definitely the increase in the need for military deployment. On the other hand, we have seen some concern about the dominance of military over civilian agencies. But definitely, this relationship will stay and will remain very important. And then next round of question, I will address to our individual speakers. speakers related to their background, and each of you will have about 3 to 4 minutes to respond. I will alert you when the time is up. So first of all, to Admiral Barry, so what is your view on the future role of the Australian Defence Force in this landscape or in the futures we foresee? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I said it was about numbers that were really important. So what are the numbers that are important to me when I look at this question? In the 2019-2020 bushfires, Australia deployed something like 250,000 firefighters on the east coast. The Australian Defence Force was able to put into the field about 7,000 people. So you can already see from the scale here that the ADF doesn't make much of a contribution. But I don't underestimate the value of the uniform on the ground when somebody's house is burned to ashes, or in the floods that followed, we're there to give a helping hand in flood-stricken communities. The problem, and we're trying to deal with this now, is how do we transition a lot of that expectation that the ADF will be there to hold the community's hand, and with the frequency and intensification of climate-related events, take it away from its primary task of being prepared to deal with the nation's enemies. This is a big problem. We're trying to think about how we can build more resilient communities so that we need the ADF less to go out there and provide that helping hand. Regrettably, in Australia, we've often had an attitude that we'll wait and see what happens and then we'll clean up the mess afterwards. But that doesn't work in my military world, never has. We always think ahead and say to ourselves, what might happen next that would create the kind of problem we don't really want to have to address? So in my time as CDF, that's a principal part of conversation with government about all the things you need to do in advance of things going wrong. So we're working on it in questions of resilience. We're doing it across things. We're talking about the climate emergency and the need to mobilise the Australian community, but that's not going to involve in any special way most people in the ADF.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Nair, please. You have about, yeah, sure. Would you mind?
NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, in the Government of India, has been created under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which created National Disaster Management Authority. We have an authority also for addressing all disasters related matters in India. NDMA has done a magnificent work in many ways. The disaster mapping is a brilliant work. Entire disaster mapping of India and the region is available with us in different ways. Now, NDRF is a combination of a civil component, it's a police, essentially a police and civil police agencies together, a strength of technological aspects, training, resources, etc. we have. And the interesting part is we have something around 18,500 women and men, and the BMI is less than 25. That shows how agile people are. Then specialized training programs, we have CSR, SR, MFR, CBRN, floodwater disasters, mountain search, deep dive, canine search, etc., etc. And the number of disaster response activities the NDRF has undertaken in India is very high. With 9095 operations conducted so far, NDRF has saved 146,412 lives, evacuated 737,110 persons, 5553 dead bodies rescued, and so on. And smart response has earned NDRF a pride of place recognized by everybody, including the Prime Minister of India. You can see a lot of messages now coming with the Prime Minister too. Secondly, the GFDRR, established in 2006, Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, administered by the World Bank, is a global partnership that helps low and middle income countries better understand and reduce the vulnerability to natural hazards and climate change. It is providing a technical assistance to modernize hydromet systems, etc., etc. At present, Afghanistan, Nepal, India, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bhutan, and Bangladesh are the member countries, and NDRF is taking the initiative forward. Major international operations by NDRF includes Japan earthquake. 25% of NDRF took part in the operation, and we extricated 7 bodies and over 50 million yen. Prime Minister of Japan, when he came to India, personally called NDRF and thanked them for this work. Nepal earthquake 2015, ma'am, it was amazing work. I don't want to give the figures here, amazing work. Turkey earthquake and 3 NDRF teams went there recently, and in 18th February 23rd, we rescued 2 victims and retrieved 85 bodies. We do international humanitarian assistance also, which is suited for that through the NDRF, National Disaster Response Reserve, which we have to other countries like Malawi, Sri Lanka, Beirut, Cambodia, Vietnam, Fiji, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Turkey, and Nepal. Regional cooperation in a large way we are doing. The role of civilian component is very important. The students' empowerment, in the colleges and schools we go, we have made a school safety program. Amazing work has been done. More than 2 million students in the schools have been empowered in that. More than 50,000 communities have been empowered in disaster resilience, and therefore we believe in that last principle of empowering the community and preparing them to make resilience in the community is the best way to take it forward. Thank you. And much to say, but stop.
Thank you, sir. Amma, please, can you please share Muhammadiyah's experience in engaging with the military during disaster relief, as well as how it's featured in your future planning? Thank you.
To also share that Muhammadiyah is one of the largest Muslim organization, and we've been having a unit for disaster response, and in a year we respond more than 100 annually. And we've been working with the Indonesian Disaster Management Agency, both at the national and the subnational level. And to give a context, in Indonesia, the lead for the humanitarian or EOC, the emergency coordinator, it's supposed to be the district disaster management agency. But in practice, there are many district military command lead the emergency operation. In this case, there are many that they are not understanding the stakeholder in humanitarian response. So what we do as the Muhammadiyah also like accompanying in coordinate center, at least to show or to also help them understanding who play on the ground, because there are many stakeholders in every subnational level. So we help them to do the coordination on the ground, like the case in the Mount Agung eruption in Bali, and also we work them to transport in a very remote area, because the military have a helicopter and all things, and Muhammadiyah have a strong emergency medical team. So they often ask us to be part of the not military operation, but they help us to reach the remote area. And also during the civil military humanitarian mission, like in Nepal, that have I was the licensing the civil military at that time, and we are like introducing the ECOSOC system. So because of the many military, like in Indonesia, they are not trained for humanitarian in subnational and also the international context. So I see the could be strengthening the capacity of the whole like humanitarian architecture in every level. And also understanding the community need, because sometimes the community afraid to approach the we call it POSCO, the command center, because full with military. So the community afraid to get in to ask the need, what their supplies. So we like to help them, to work with them how to be able the community to reach out and engage with the community.
Yeah, thanks. Indeed, it's very important to prepare different stakeholders that do not work with each other often to be ready to work with each other. Dr. Takuchi, just now actually you mentioned that East Asia is full of traditional and non-traditional security challenges, and the Japanese self-defense force actually has been deeply involved in civil military operations in disasters. So what is the future trajectory of the Japanese self-defense force?
Well, Doctor, thank you very much for that very important question. And before answering to that specific question, I'd like to add one more comment about the Quad, because the origin of the Quad is the tsunami core group of the 4 countries in response to the earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia in 2004. So the origin of the Quad is humanitarian efforts and also more operational rather than diplomatic coordination. So we have to be reminded about that. But anyway, Japan is very much prone to natural disasters geologically and geographically. And earthquakes, tsunami, heavy rainfalls, and heavy snowfall, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the Japanese defense forces, the disaster relief is one of the main missions of the Japanese military organization. This year is 2023, and just 100 years ago, September 1st, 1923, a big earthquake hit the Tokyo region. And that's why every year, September 1st is the Disaster Prevention Day for Japan. So from late August to early September, the central government of Japan and almost every local communities do disaster prevention exercises nationwide. And on September 1st, 1923, around 105 army troops and 105,000 people were killed or missing. This number, 105,000, is 10 times as many as that of Great East Japan earthquake of March 11, 2011. And around 240,000 army troops and 78,000 Navy troops. In total, more than 300,000 Japanese troops were deployed for the relief operations. And at the same time, the US, UK, France, Italy, and China sent their naval ships for the relief operations. The US contribution by its Asian fleet and army was outstanding, and it contributed to good relationship between the US Navy and the Imperial Japanese Navy, even though at that time the overall diplomatic relationship between the two countries began to erode. And anyway, the military contribution to the relief operations helped generate trust of the military forces among the Japanese nationals, and this situation is the same even today. And disaster relief, mitigation and prevention is a big issue in the Japanese mindset on the national security of this country, of Japan, and it's a national security issue. And therefore, the national security strategy and national defense strategy, which were launched last December, refers to the national disaster-related issues as a matter of Japan's own national security. Even though geopolitical risk is increasing in Northeast Asia, like North Korean missile and nuclear ambition, Japan's policy orientation to continue to tackle the serious human security issue in the global context remains intact. And also Japan is conscious that human security is the concept Japan expresses itself. And human security is one of the guiding principles of Japan's international security cooperation. In fact, Japan's new national security strategy commits to response and reduction of composite disaster risks, quoting the SDGs. And disaster relief and humanitarian assistance is not the same as national defense against foreign invasions, but a contribution of the defense forces on disaster relief and humanitarian assistance is indispensable, particularly due to increasing and magnified natural disasters caused by climate change. The military organization is a unique organization. It does everything. It's versatile and sustainable. It can operate for a long time all on its own. This unique capability is fully utilized in large-scale disaster relief. So the public expectation in Japan to the defense forces for disaster relief will continue, or even larger in spite of the intensified geopolitical risks.
Yeah, thank you for your intervention. Now the floor is open to the audience to raise the questions. The same as previous sessions, we are going to use the pigeonhole. So now first, please allow me to raise this question to Admiral Barry's for what are the most effective, sorry. I just try to feature this on our screen. So, you see? Okay. What are the most effective strategies for civil-military partnerships in the Asia-Pacific to address escalating economic losses, vulnerabilities, and ecosystem risks?
There's no doubt in my mind it's all about networking and understanding at all levels. And of course, going back to the question on the ADF, we've spent many years coming and helping people in disaster relief mode. But I think when I come back and talk about the numbers, you know, I just can constantly come to the idea that it's not enough to do it that way. And building the relationships towards resilience in the region is, I think, where we have to go, because there's probably much we can do to help each other if only we did it now rather than waiting for something to go wrong, and in which case we'd be much more fruitful. I often think about this in terms of being neighbours. You know, when things go bad in your home, often it's your neighbours who'll come and help. And I think that is a sort of simple story about what we need to start doing in our region. But, you know, all of that is going to help, but it's not going to deal with the answer of, you know, a 6 billion plus region of, in our world, which we term in the Security Leaders Climate Group Disaster Alley, because that's what it looks like. And so resilience is the answer to do the best we can, building on what we know.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Nair. You mentioned that sometimes civil organizations tend to, we can see it from the screen, that tend to defer to the military, especially on the ground. So have you seen instances where it's the other way around and where the militaries defer to civilian organizations?
Okay, you are seeking instances, so let me start with an instance. I was posted in Jammu, Kashmir, the northern part of India, in 2005. I was heading the Central Reserve Police Force in uniform, and there was a disaster, in Afghan-centric earthquake was there, major disaster, and it impacted India too, especially in the Kashmir side, a lot. Now, that time, the civilians took over the entire responsibility of disaster management. Army was called in, military was called in, but military was so busy in the national security apparatus. Obviously, they cannot thin out or lean their security system there. Naturally, they said, no, we are not available today. I appreciate that also. But they would rather give you helicopters and things like that for me to take on. That's fair enough. So when the defense, the military has got their own priorities very clear. The national security is first priority. When national security comes, your disaster management, let others handle, they will extend all the help. I appreciate the point. Therefore, if they defer that, there must be some reason. I've had many more instances like this where I can very well understand why it happened. Therefore, I contribute to the main principle I mentioned earlier. If you can build up in countries which are disaster prone, disaster affected, we can build up a specialized unit like the National Disaster Response Force we have in India at the national level. Then every district, 28 states in India have a state disaster response force. At the community level, we have community response disaster system, and the district level, there are 729 districts in India, and each district we have a district disaster management authority. So this three-tier classification is working very well, and where we don't have to depend on the army for and deprive them of their duties. But defense is always available on call. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now I'd like to turn to Ahmad to about this question which is about your experience in convincing the Indonesian military, which is known for being guarded, careful, that civilian experts are amplifying force of the mission rather than a destruction risk to them.
Yeah, that's a good question. How we do it, yeah, to convince, yeah. So the experience and the communication is the very important. So that's why building up communication, building up trust between the different sector in humanitarian will have the impact. Because if there is no trust among us, then how we could work together. So by communicating regularly and also working together, it's also help in understanding each other. And also by looking like practicing together. So it's also part of the system. Sometimes it's not easy because not every military know the NGO. Not military also know the local actor on the ground, but the communication and also the ongoing process of like learning each other. And also I heard right now, I just a week ago in Indonesia, we do have tried to build up the module for civil military coordination training. The module is already made and have introduced for how actually military and civil coordination, because that's crucial in time of humanitarian crisis, how actually coordination work, because without having coordination and trust, it's difficult to build upon the activities and respond.
Thanks, Amma. And the next question is for Professor Takuchi. How prepare the Japan self-defense force can cope with the growing demands for their support?
Yes, that's a very serious question, actually. Very simply put, it's a matter of political leadership, and also it's about the common shared understanding of the necessity of a whole of government approach. Particularly in terms of humanitarian assistance, larger scale disaster relief, the role of the military forces, that's indispensable because of the versatile nature, multi-purpose nature of the military organization. So, demands are increasing, and risks are increasing, but the resources are limited. So the better coordination based on a whole of government approach, that's very, very indispensable for effective response. Very simple one, but it's easier said than done.
And our next question actually, it can be directed to all of our panelists. So in this region, at least, civil-military partnerships generally respond to natural disasters. Then does any one of you envision these being extended to support more complex situations in fragile and conflict-affected states? Admiral, please.
I'll bite off on that one. What we talk about in our climate security group is about human security, and we don't make any difference between people in this country or that country or whatever. And I think we are approaching a time, again, to put on my helicopter view hat when responsibility and protecting civilians in fragile and where conflict is affecting the way states are managed is going to be important. I'll leave you with this thought. The most revolutionary people on this planet are always starving people. When people starve, they will do extraordinary things to change their environment. A lot of them will get up and leave and try and find another hope, as you can see with the exodus of people from Africa now into Europe. But they will also topple the civilian administrations and create a civil disorder. And when you look ahead into a future where fresh water is going to be in short supply, where the global demand for food is going to grow by 50%, but the quality of food drops by 30%, you can start to see that we're, at 10 billion people, we're really going to be in a lot of trouble trying to satisfy all these needs. But then the conundrum becomes, how do we reduce that number down to, as some would argue, 2.5 billion people? And the only answer I can have for that is, of course, the education of women in a lot of countries. So childbearing needs to be somehow managed without the imposition of the state. And then secondly, how do we share the resources of the planet in a much more equitable way? One of the issues when we get to the mitigation is that the wealth of the planet exists in the hands of 1% of the population, and the rest of us, are not having much impact for change in that environment.
Dr. Nair?
I think you and the workshop person, you have the right to speak on that.
Yeah. Sure. Later we will have a panelist to speak about humanitarian diplomacy in the first session in the afternoon. Yeah, Ama or Professor Takuchi, you have any views to share? Yeah, then we go to the...
I probably just
yes, sure.
add a little bit what Professor Brian said. That the thing is how actually the civil-military engagement could be directed into who is led, especially during the conflict situation.
Yeah.
So military strong presence will usually seen as a threat for the community in the affected area. So in this case, I think when the civil-military partnership engage in situation where conflict happen, the military uniform is not the front, but the civil will be in the front because they understand the contact and not providing even more threat. And because in many cases, in many parts of the world, they also abuse and many violence abuse against women or any other affected area. So it's really tricky to say, or there is no clear distinction how we do work it. But at least who lead the response or the support to the affected community will be crucial. Who can be accepted by the affected areas. We have to see from the perspective of the people of the affected area, not from the responder. Yeah? So that's very important if we could engage better between the civil military.
Thanks, Ama. And the next question can be answered, I believe, by all of our panelists, but from different perspective or point of standing. Oh, sorry. I think I project the wrong question to everyone. Yeah, it should be this one. So could the panelists share their perspectives on the balance of resourcing that governments should be assigning to building national resilience as opposed to military preparedness? Admiral, please.
Somebody knows about my hobby horse. Look, the issue here is back to the simple fact that investing in something now to head off something that might look a lot worse is a really smart decision. And yet, in Australia, and I suggest in other parts of the world, it's very hard to say to a government, you need to invest money in these kinds of processes and systems because this will avert a potential catastrophe. But unfortunately, they will often think that potential catastrophe won't occur on their watch. And so it becomes very, very difficult. Let me go back to the fossil fuel industry. In Australia, we spend about $15 billion a year in subsidising the fossil fuel industry. How much better could we spend that money doing other things is a serious question. But, you know, trying to make some sort of impact on that question is very, very difficult because those systems are already in place and they're benefiting the people who make money out of them. Very hard to make those kinds of changes and very hard to do it suddenly. But this is the problem we're confronting, isn't it? Now, on a military preparedness issue, I say it's about planning, rehearsal, practicing, lessons learned, planning, rehearsal, etc., etc., etc. And so scenario-based planning is important. Wargaming is important. All of these things have roles to play. And we should never underestimate it. And my personal experience was when Sydney was going into the Olympic Games, I convinced the government to spend 2 years wargaming scenarios about the Olympic Games on what could go wrong. And you would be amazed what we learned, even at the Prime Minister's level, just doing that kind of work.
Dr. Nair, yeah, from your perspective as a former head of a civilian agency, so what has been your experience in persuading the government to balance this?
I think it's a very good question. The balancing is a very important art. It's a political decision to be taken on the basis of assessment, on the basis of technological assessment, impact assessment, and also on the basis of projections. Projection means not just simple tabletop, it should be artificial intelligence too. Now you have AI systems which can say what will happen 2 years after, 3 years after. All those predictions are available today. Therefore, based on that projection, they have to balance their resources. When it comes to the defense, you cannot compromise the budget for the defense. At the end of the day, the military is to defend the country. Their job is very clearly lined out. So therefore, there is no question of reducing their budget in any way. At the same time, when you come to building resilience of the public, it is not too much of cost. It's a cost-effective mechanisms are available today. I can go on speaking for 1 hour on the very interesting examples we have done across the country in India on cost-effective public resilience mechanisms. Even the mention of the school safety program. If you have 1 million students today, know what they should do a disaster comes, an earthquake comes or a flood comes or a gas comes. We had a gas tragedy in Bhopal where we had 10,000 people died. Today, if something happens in Bhopal, nobody will die. How do you empower the public? How do you empower the students? How do you empower the community? So that it doesn't cost much. It is more of a will than resource, I would say that way. Today, the government of India has taken a conscious decision that both have to be balanced well. No compromise on the budget for the defense at any cost. At the same time, there's minimum resources, utilizing minimum resources, building public resilience is the in thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Political will and political leadership. Amma, from your head of as a government agency, yeah.
Yeah, as an advisory board in BNPB, I was, we always encourage the government because by laws, Indonesian Disaster Management Agency is led by the civil, not military. So if you want to build strengthen at the national level, you have to also strengthen in the civil. And in this regard, the civil is not only national because disaster is local. So the subnational level is very important. So providing resources at the subnational level will create the national resilience because at the end, who respond are at the local. So national cannot go directly to the local. It will take longer. So providing support or balancing resources at the subnational level will be crucial as a country like in Indonesia and the Philippines and all many Asian countries because the disaster is local. And also this balance is also become like Nair said that very political. So it's discussed in the Congress. They like to always the security issue become forefront. Then we have to negotiate in terms of how to push the resilient agenda at the subnational level, not only at the national level. That's what.
Professor Takuchi, like from your perspective.
My view is very similar to what already discussed. So political leadership, that's the most important thing. And also, in terms of Japan, there are a number of people in Japan who say that the Japanese defense forces are tired of too much public expectation to disaster relief for the Japanese. But I'm not so sure whether it is true or not. But anyway, sometimes the Japanese defense forces are engaged in disaster relief operations at the expense of their necessity to train for combat operations. So as Dr. Hussein, as you said, the local disasters should be dealt with by local communities as a matter of principle. So kind of, the division of labor between the central government and the local government, that's necessary. And anyway, the political leadership based on the principle of the whole of government approach, that's the most important thing, I think.
Thank you. And the next question actually is about geopolitics. So, considering although we have a lot of challenges from the non-traditional security perspective, but geopolitics is also a factor that we need to take into consideration. So given what's happening on the geopolitical front, do you still think civil-military partnerships or military-to-military coordination can still work? If yes, how it can be effective? Admiral Barry.
Well, I think the world is very different today than the one I experienced, but one of the entrancing ideas of being a Chief of Defence was building leader-to-leader relationships around the region. And this is the most interesting outcome. When you discuss your problems with other leaders, you discover they have the same problems. And so I always found that really fascinating. And I was a member of a thing called the CEO Circle, and I discovered that people of large organisations and corporations had the same problems too. So we had a lot to share and a lot to talk about. So I do think it is possible to build systems around geopolitical tensions. What worries me is that when I look at a lot of leaders today, I think certainly at the political level, they do not have the wisdom of 1945. They're younger people, their experience has got nothing to do with the catastrophes that occurred between 1914 and 1945. And the spirit of compromise which led to build the Court of World Order that we're just moving out of now into a new world order. And I think that is a big problem. And I now talk about principled leadership as opposed to leadership, because I think it is very important that leaders know what they stand for. And it ought to be possible, despite our differences, to build relationships across the barriers that we think exist for the betterment of us all. And I go back to what I said at the start of this panel. We don't have the time to spend the next 25 years trying to solve these problems. We've got to do it tomorrow. And so I urge all of us in this room to think about principled leadership and what we can do to make a difference in our world to build a better future.
Any further? Yeah, Dr.
I think the answer is yes. As rightly said, the military-military relationship and civil-military relationship depends on the leaders who are on ground. At the end of the day, going beyond frontiers is a political decision. We can convince the political leaders, yes, this is required because the expertise and human rights, humanitarian forum matters. I'm sure every politician will agree on that humanitarian matters. So therefore, the humanitarian aspect will take us beyond boundaries, and I'm sure there's a larger role to play in the coming days in ensuring safety and peace in the challenging areas where there are issues. Thank you.
Yeah, Alma, please.
I will also agree with the previous speaker that yes, it could be going the civil military and military coordination, because it's already ongoing. It will not like take back, and I think that's as long as the humanitarian principle been leveraged, then it could be respond it well. But if there is no change in humanitarian system, the way that we use traditionally work, then I believe it wouldn't be the frontier of the humanitarian sphere.
Professor Takuchi.
Well, civil-military partnerships for humanitarian cause and military-to-military coordination for international security or national security. The purpose of both things is common. The protection of lives of the nationals. Very simple. So, we have to be reminded of the most important cause. I think so. The political leaders must make their own decisions based on that common principle.
Yes, adhering to the humanitarian principle so we can continue humanitarian civil-military coordination and partnerships. And that brings us to the end of this session. So thank you for everyone's attention. And now we have...
Thank you, Lina, and speakers on this panel. May I now invite Colonel Freddy on stage to present a token of appreciation to the four speakers. Colonel Freddy, please.